Hi, welcome to the Influence Women podcast. I'm Global Director Kathleen Cooke, and I'm excited to have you with us today as we have a special guest, Shauna Amick, with us today. Shauna works with Joni and Friends and is an advocate and a speaker for those with special needs. You don't want to miss this. If you're a writer, producer, director, you're in media or entertainment or in the arts industries, she's going to talk to us about how we can better create content, artistic endeavors that can resonate with those with special needs, and how we can then go forward and be more of an advocate for them as well. Stay tuned. Hi, well, welcome to Influence Women and our wonderful podcast today with Shauna Amick. I am so thrilled to have her on our show today and our podcast. She's got a wealth of wisdom and information she's going to be sharing with you. Let me tell you just a little bit about Shauna before we begin, and then we'll invite Shauna to come on. So Shauna, give me a second here to introduce you. She's passionate about the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, aren't we all? And yet it was solidified when her third child, Sarah, was born and diagnosed with Down syndrome, almost fatal heart issues. But Shauna has used that suffering to be a powerful influence in our culture and our world today. She's a speaker and an author and an advocate of special needs, and works with many organizations as she speaks and teaches both on radio shows and in conferences around the country. She's worked with Joni and Friends now for 14 years as the direct response director and the radio, and also in charge of radio channel marketing. I'll get all this out. She's such a clever and successful woman. You may hear Shauna every week on the Joni and Friends show. You might catch that on Focus on the Family and some of your other radio channels that you can research. You can also see her at conferences as she advocates again for children and for adults with special needs, and how God can be in their lives and be successful. So Shauna, thank you and welcome to the Influence Women podcast today.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, it's great to have you. I just briefly talked a little bit about your bio, but really go into who you are, how I know that Sarah's birth had a direct effect on your life, but tell us just a little bit more about who you are and what you do there.
Well, sure. I mean, I'll talk about my calling as a mother first. Right before we jumped on the podcast, you were saying that's our highest calling, and I couldn't agree with you more, Kathleen. So I have three children, and Sarah is our youngest. So my oldest is 26, then we have a 21-year-old, and Sarah is almost 20. And so it was 20 years ago, I laid on that ultrasound table, and we could look into the secret place of my womb and see what God was knitting together. And what we saw is that Sarah did have a very serious heart defect and all the markers for Down syndrome. Now, what was interesting, Kathleen, is up to that point, I had been working with pro-life ministries like CareNet. I was a counselor for women in crisis pregnancies, helping them see the biblical truth and value of life. I was a speaker for CareNet, speaking into microphones, again, the sanctity of all human life, regardless of disability or any other struggles. And there on that ultrasound table, it was as though the Lord was saying, now I'm going to give you, Shauna, an opportunity to prove what you say you believe. Because as you might imagine, just moments after getting off that ultrasound table, the doctor was honestly pressuring me to schedule an abortion.
Mm.
And
Yes,
I
that
praise
happens a
God.
lot these
Oh,
days.
It sure does. And I just have to thank the Lord for
It's a
showing
robber in disguise, isn't it? It's a thief in
me.
disguise.
Yes, yep. And how scary for those women who don't know the scriptures that talk about the value of all life, right? Who haven't had that education or just haven't had the opportunity to get in the word and know exactly what God has to say about all people, right? All babies, just all of us and our inherent
Yes.
worth as humans made in his image.
Well, and that started you on a journey then into doing and being an even stronger advocate then for these children. What I love about your story too is you continue to lead by example. You continue not just from that experience, but into the work that you're doing today and what you're doing. You said that the goal, that one of your goals is to lead like Jesus in every environment. What do you believe is the most challenging environment that we face today?
Oh, that's a great question. And it might be different for different people. But when I think about that, honestly, I feel like it's when we're in a situation where maybe our values or our character is threatened, or maybe there's an attempt to threaten our character. Because what happens then, Kathleen, right? Just human nature is that we're going to feel that pride well up in us, right? And we might have
Right.
a gut response to stand up for ourselves in a way that might not be godly. And so that's when we really have to lean in and say, yes, we need boundaries. Yes, we have every right to advocate for ourselves. Of course, we're not supposed to just be doormats and let people walk all over us. But we can do it in a Christ-like way, right? We can do it in a way where we don't lose our witness. We don't lose our Christianity, as the saying used to go, and that we also just continue to point people to Christ.
That's such great information and great wisdom, Shauna. Our listeners, for the most part, are women who lead in the areas of media, entertainment, arts, music, and leadership. But I often say if you own a cell phone and have a social media account, you're in media too
That's
these days.
right.
Very much so. But you, particularly because of the work you do, are in an environment of parents and children with special needs. What do we need to know as producers, as artists, as creators? What do we need to know on how they consume media possibly different than we do, or are they consuming media the same as we do?
Well, that's a situation that I would say first off is case by case, right? Because when you know one child with a disability, you know one child with a disability, right? And we can't use that big huge paintbrush to paint everybody the same, whether we have a disability or not. But one thing, I'm thinking about my own daughter, right, Sarah, and how she consumes media. And for her, it's very soothing. It can be very soothing. And it's more than, sometimes when we'll use either music or movies as a reinforcement or, an award maybe for good behavior, a job well done. It's even more than that. For Sarah, uh, the characters in these movies and some of her favorite musicians. So I just have to say her favorite of all time is Elvis.
I love
And
it.
she,
The
when
king is
she,
still the king, isn't
oh,
he?
in her heart, he sure is. And I have to say this, Kathleen, in case your listeners don't know this, when people would stop an Elvis concert by, or scream out, "You're the king," he would stop the concert and say, "There's only one king, and that's
Oh,
Jesus
that's
Christ."
awesome. Yeah,
So we
yeah.
just love that witness, right? But if Sarah's had a particularly stressful day at school, or if there's something going on in her life where she just needs to decompress, and certainly all of us have days like that. It's an Elvis concert that she's familiar with. She loves,
Mhm.
she's got a documentary about his gospel music.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
or even some Disney movies where she knows the characters because in her heart and her mind, they're real. Those are real people and real parts of her life. So there's a sense of familiarity that is very calming.
That's so great. I love it. I love it. Well, we're certainly living in a culture that is immersed in our screens these days. I laughingly say, don't tell me you're not addicted to your phone because how often we panic when we can't find our phone,
For
right? Or
sure.
lose it. And I'm constantly working with my grandchildren now to keep them off my phone. They're always coming over with they're not allowed. They're not old enough yet. My oldest granddaughter will be 11, and we still have not gotten her a cell phone at all yet. So she likes to come over and grab my cell phone if she can get away with it from time to time, and she certainly knows how to manipulate it. And so I really believe, though, that personally as a media producer that most special needs children and regular normal type children all consume media differently, but they all want to be on it all the time. And so the challenge is often to keep them off of it for them to be doing some other activities, of course, that will help grow their brain in different ways.
Right.
I know you're on the radio a lot with Johnny. You're speaking at conferences. How about communicating? Many of our listeners are speakers, they're authors. What have you learned, and you might share with some of your tips on communicating with parents and children with special needs, and how we could do that a little bit more effectively?
Thank you even for asking that. That's a beautiful question. Well, if are we talking about in person or through media
Yes,
or all of the
both.
above?
Many of our listeners are speakers. They'll speak at regular
Sure.
conferences, and then many of them are podcasters or have radio shows or on television. But we don't always think about those with special needs often. And I know there may be some unique things that we could glean from you on how to reach into their lives more effectively and speak into their lives.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm going to pick up on something you just said because that is number one. When you said we don't always think about people with special needs, so there's the first order of business, right? Start thinking about folks with disabilities, and it could be as simple or as practical as when we're getting our message together, we're putting our show notes together, we're going out to speak at a conference. Have that sticky note that says, remember our friends with disabilities, and it will just help us as we're putting our content together. Now, if we're in person, Kathleen, what's so important to remember is that every single one of us is created in the image of God. And when we understand that biblical truth, it is going to permeate everything we do and say. So
I
that means
love that.
if I'm
Love
at
that.
if I'm speaking at the conference and after it's over, people want to come up and connect on a more personal level. And let's say there's a mom and let's say she has two children and one has a disability and the other doesn't, right? How are we to treat all three of those people? Well, the simple answer is equally. That means I'm going to look in the eyes of all three people, mom and both of the children, disabled and non-disabled. I'm not going to ignore one child over the other. And I'll just say this, I'm sure you and your listeners know this, but maybe you can imagine this happens in my own family all the time, is there tend to be two extremes. So one would be folks meet us and they are doting on Sarah and ignoring my children without disabilities.
Mm.
How do you think that makes them feel, right? And it's exactly the same if these well-intentioned people are talking to my children without disabilities and ignoring Sarah. Either way, right, we're making a statement that we do not see all life as equal. But when I
Mm.
take the time to say hi to everybody, look everybody in the eyes, speak to everyone with respect, that is what we're talking about when we say we want to lead like Jesus in every situation, because without saying it, I've now communicated everybody I'm talking to is valuable in God's eyes and in mine.
Oh, it's beautiful. That's so true. That's so true. And you're right. Often at certain conferences and things where a child or an adult who has special needs is highlighted or gives a testimony of how God has been in their lives, we often, ignore the other siblings who are not in the limelight, and often and there can be some challenges there as well. So treating everyone with dignity is so
Exactly.
important and such a
That's
such
right.
a such a good thing to remember. As writers, producers, and actors in the industry, we know that there are lots of roles that we can audition for, that we could write for. How could you share with us a few tips and insights on how you feel the industry treats children, adults? In the industry, are they discriminated against? Do you feel like there ought to be more roles for special need with people with special needs?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for thinking of that. Kathleen, there are over 1 billion people in the world with disabilities. And in the United States, it's over 25% of people have some sort of disability. And so the first question I would ask us is that reflected in the media when we're watching the screen, right? Whether it's social media, a movie, whatever we're seeing, um, is that population, right? Is that percentage of our population represented that way? Do we that well, here we have another example of somebody with a disability on this show, or is it very rare, right? Because that's the first question. I mean, I'm just going to answer it for us, right? The obvious answer is no. We do not have that sort of representation in media. And so I don't have a personal experience with trying to get a person with a disability an acting role. So I don't want to act like I know what I'm talking about at that level. But so perhaps it's not discrimination. Perhaps it's just, again, a lack of awareness. Like we said, again, that yellow sticky note. Are we remembering our brothers and sisters with disabilities? And when that becomes part of just our makeup, then we would look at roles, right? We might look at a script and say, you know what, this person, this character could very easily be played by somebody who's a wheelchair user. This could be somebody who has a cognitive disability, and then go out and find that actor. And I think that would be a somewhat easy thing to do. And then our screens, our media would be a better representation of real life.
Mhm. That's so good. So I'm wondering more and more how we could also, as Christians, advocate more. So it's a
Yeah.
good thing to talk about.
Yeah, and Kathleen, I have to first thank you, right? Just thank you for bringing up the topic here, because you are part of the solution, right? Just by putting it out there and having your listeners consider, you know what? I could have somebody with a disability in that role. I didn't think of it. And that's fine, right? There's a difference, I always say, in ignorance and indifference, right? And a lot of times the word ignorant or ignorance has a bad rap, but really it just means I didn't know. It's not,
Right.
it doesn't have to have a negative connotation. It's just, oh, I didn't know. So if we have somebody who's producing media who just never thought of it before, I didn't know, I didn't even think of including people with disabilities. Now they're educated, and now they can be proactive in finding actors who would represent our brothers and sisters with disabilities. Of course, the other extreme is indifference, which
Hmm.
means, oh, I know that I'm not representing people with disabilities in the work that I'm created, but I just don't care. Right? That's what we don't want, right? So when I hear about folks who are ignorant in the positive sense, they just weren't aware. That actually excites me, because that's an opportunity to make a change. And so what you're doing here with your podcast is you're helping folks who just didn't know. You're putting it on their radar. And I'm going to be so positive as to think that we'll see a change as a result of your efforts today, Kathleen. And,
Oh.
as you said, I'm in California, I'm in the Los Angeles area. It wasn't long ago, I saw a pretty big billboard and it said, inclusion isn't inclusion until people with disabilities are included. And it
Mm.
was referencing Hollywood. It was referencing, movies and
Hmm.
screen time, as we call it. So there is a movement to just educate and put people with disabilities on the radar. And for any of your listeners who are creating art right now and are looking at casting, I would just say, which roles could you use to include people who are either a wheelchair user or with a cognitive disability? It's not as difficult as you might think.
Hmm. Oh, I love that. Yes. Well, thank you for those kind remarks. And yes, at Influence Women, we focus on women specifically who are also challenged in the industry because it has continued to be such a male-dominated industry in so many ways. So, Influence Women was created to help women overcome some of those challenges they have. So, we're with you. We're with those special needs children and special needs adults who are often discriminated against and they have challenges. And we need to make room for them, even in our writing tables, around the writing
Yes.
tables, or in production. Laughingly, I remember Steven Spielberg was asked the question when he was first starting in the business, what's the most important thing, a director needs? And he says, a good pair of tennis shoes. Well, what if you're in a wheelchair? What
Right.
if you have some physical issues that doesn't
Sure.
allow you to jump around and run
Right.
from place to place? Because that's not going to happen for you. So maybe we say you just need a good, wheelchair to help you along, or the ability for them to manipulate and still make room for those directors and producers to on sets who have some physical deformities or a hearing issue or uh, you know uh, uh, a sight issue in some way. So we need to make room for them, even not only in front of the screen, but behind the screen as well.
That's a
And
great
so,
point.
and I would encourage parents who have children who have special needs and special challenges right now that you would, if they see a need to want to go into the industry, to encourage them to do that. We need their voice, we need them in the industry. And I believe some of our best writers can actually come from some of our special needs children who have a special eye and a special ear for those who are challenged today because they're not perfectly made. None of us are perfectly made. That's the whole issue, really, is we all have defects within us. But the joy of it is that God takes our imperfections and uses them so that we can then use those imperfections for his glory and his kingdom purposes. So I love that about it. Shauna, tell us about some of your resources that you have there and how we might get a hold of you, and some of the places that we could continue to get connection with you.
Sure, thank you. Well, our website is joniandfriends.org, Joni, right? Named after Johnny Erickson Tata. So one more time, it's joniandfriends.org, and you'll find all kinds of resources there, including our radio page. So you can get on our website and just find Johnny's radio page. And oh my goodness, Kathleen, she has over 11,000 radio programs in the archives, and they are
Wow.
every one just as timely and relevant as they were when she started her radio ministry. And they're all available right there for free, of course. So we have so many resources as far as media is concerned. Johnny's wisdom and biblical encouragement is all there for you. And then we have resources for how to develop disability ministry. and this is primarily for the church, but the resources would be relevant across all genres. So if your listeners are interested, how can I make, my workplace or the set or my team more inclusive to people with disabilities? You just go on johnnyandfriends.org and you'll be able to find all sorts of resources to motivate, inspire, and encourage you along the way. And I would love to talk to anybody who's interested, and you can find me on the same website.
Great, great. Well, for those of you who don't know Johnny Erickson's story, Tata is her married name. Please go on her site and read. She's got amazing books out as well. And just to give you a short history, she was a teenager and dove into a lake and broke her neck, and it landed her in a wheelchair and in severe depression. But she picked up a paintbrush and she started to paint with her teeth. And I've been at your offices there in Los Angeles a couple times, and been able to spend some time with Johnny. And she is just an amazing, amazing woman. She
For
continues
sure.
to amaze me. And watching her paint, physically, just standing behind her and watching her paint with this little brush is phenomenal. God's just given her such a talent. And so, it's my heart to see that we can take artists, talented people who have these special needs, and how God takes them and uses them to do extraordinary things. Johnny has a wheelchair ministry that takes prisoners and has a whole program where they repair old wheelchairs and then refurbishes them and gives them out then to those who can't afford to have a wheelchair. And so not only is she working with those with special needs in that way, but she's working with our prisoners and helping them feel worth, giving them a place of value, even behind prison walls. So she's just created such unique things. They have camps, I know, where they invite the parents and the children to come, and they give parents a break because the service and the care of children with special needs is so enormous and so consuming. And these are all areas in which you can volunteer, in which you can help support their efforts there. And so I would just encourage you to continue. If you didn't know anything about Johnny in the past, that you get a book, one of her books, that you take part in some of their podcasts and get information about them as well. You will be inspired if you're creative or an artist and you need inspiration. Go there and listen to some of the podcasts and listen to some of the ways in which these children and these adults have persevered and endured through all of their suffering. And God has turned their joy in around. They have turned their suffering into joy, because the joy of the Lord is our strength. So, Shauna, thanks again for being with us today. One final word. What would you say if you were to encourage a parent out there with a special needs child today? What's your final word in helping to encourage them in all that they are and who they are in Christ's eyes?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kathleen. I would say you can do this, and you're not alone, and God sees you and is with you. Kathleen, one of my friends who was married to a gentleman with a disability, she says, being a family with disability, it's not worse than not having disability, but it is harder. And that's something we can all remember and have compassion for parents, for siblings, for people with disabilities. But for that parent, that mom, that single mom, I will just say, God sees you, right? You are not alone, and you can do this. And your child is fearfully and wonderfully made in God's image. And I always like to remember from Matthew, where Jesus says, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did for me." And that's helpful, Kathleen. And I hope
Yes.
that helps your listeners. If you're that mom who is staying up all night with your child with a disability, staying up all night with Jesus, right? When you're cleaning up that child's face. I mean, Sarah's almost 20 and I still have to help her in the bathroom every time. And you might imagine after 20 years, it could be weary, right? It could get tiring, but it's not, because I remember what an honor that God has entrusted me to take care of this young lady. And as I'm taking care of Sarah, I'm taking care of my Lord, right? I'm doing this for Jesus also. So I would ask those moms and dads, of course, whoever's listening, um, just remember, you're doing this for your child. You're doing this for the Lord, and God is pleased with what you're doing. So
Oh,
don't
it's so
don't you
beautiful.
dare give up.
Love it. Love it. Thanks again, Shauna, for being with us. And again, get your resources at johnnyandfriends.com or .org.
.org, O-R-G. Yeah, thank
.org.
you.
Yes. Thanks again, Shauna. And thanks for joining us today for the Influence Women podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Kathleen. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us today for the Influence Women podcast with Shauna Amick. You can learn more about Shauna and the work she does with Joni and Friends and as an advocate for those with special needs at joniandfriends.org. And don't forget, come alongside and join us at influencewomen.org as well. Join us for our webinars, our podcast, or perhaps at one of our special local events that happen all the time. We love advocating for women and supporting those of you who are in the arts, music, industries, and media. So come alongside and join Influence Women. We'll see you next time now for the next Influence Women podcast.